Today we have, for this online lecture, Hamano Takeshi, Associate Professor of Sociology in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Kitakyūshū. And Professor Hamano will talk about the work of Okazaki Kyoko, specifically Helter Skelter and Pink, and how the girls depicted by her have special meaning in the consumer society. Additionally, this lecture explores why her works gained so much popularity, not only in Japan, but also in the global society, making his works appreciable even today. Professor Hamano, among many of his publications, had already written an insightful article about this topic, titled Witness to a Transition, the Manga of Kyoko Okazaki and the Feminine Self in the Shift Toward Flat Culture in Japanese Consumer Society, published in the volume Women's Manga in Asia and Beyond, Uniting Different Cultures and Identities. And at the end of the lecture, it will be possible to ask some questions. If you want to do this, write in the chat or raise your hand with the Zoom function. Please keep following Gesshin for other events and lectures dedicated to manga studies. I don't know what to steal other time to Professor Hamano. So thank you for being here and enjoy the lecture.
Good morning, everyone, or good evening, or whatever. My name is Takeshi Hamano. I'm an associate professor of sociology of the University of Kitakyūshū. My university is a small public university located southmost Japan in the Kyushu Island. Her works are translated in many languages now. That's why it's pretty worse in the kind of global community to read her works again. Okay, it's an introduction. This image is a kind of first her publication titled Virgin, published in 1985, almost 40 years ago. Okay. All right. Let me talk about Kyoko Okazaki quickly. So Kyoko Okazaki was born in Tokyo in 1963. She began to publish illustrations, not just kind of manga cartoons. She started her career as an illustrator and now moved to cartoons in high school and debuted as a professional cartoonist in 1983. She was a junior college student. She rigorously published comics, illustrations, and essays across various genres until 1996, when she accidentally was run by the car, and because of such kind of tragic accident, she had to stop writing her works, and she never published anymore since then. But she has been drawn attention by various social and culture critics, including many sociologists like me. As you see, many kind of critics, many kind of books, texts about her publications on the right side of my slide, and the social change in Japan since the 1980s. And many kind of social critics and cultural critics agree with that point. So she was a real witness of kind of the transition of Japanese society between 1980s and 1990s, because Japan experienced a kind of big change after post-war period. Post-war period is started after Japan was defeated by Pacific War. Okay, and now so I see many kind of translations of her works in many languages, at least called English, French, and Italian. But not all of her works are translated into many languages. Only limited publications are translated. That's why, so today, I'd like to introduce more kind of very different, diverse works from her early career to the mature stage. Okay. Now, so I show you very kind of her early career. This is a very early career of her manga from Virgin, published 1985. So she was inspired by very famous manga artists like Tezuka Osamu. And she was also kind of influenced by many famous girls manga artists in the 60s and the 70s. That's why so her early touch, her early drawing style is very kind of hybrid of shoujo manga, girls manga, and shonen manga, boys manga. That's why so her expression is a very kind of emotional, a very deep emotional expression of kind of protagonist comes from shoujo manga, influenced by shoujo manga. And in the meantime, very light touch, light drawing comes from shonen manga style. It's a very mixed hybrid style. Is a very unique manga of Kyoko Okazaki. Okay. So after what talking about herself, now let me talk about the content of this lecture. So now, I almost finishing the introductory part, and I move on to section 2 about material girls in Japanese consumer society. In this section, I'd like to introduce you what is consumer society in Japan, especially so the bubble economy period in the late 90s and late 80s and early 90s. And after the burst of bubble economy, so Japan experienced a very kind of rapid social change, not just about collapse of kind of domestic economic situation, but also influenced by the rapid process of globalization since 1990s, late 90s. In such circumstances, many sociologists, critics began to argue, many Japanese began to feel a kind of sense of ontological insecurity. And I also explore how Okazaki represented and described such kind of feeling and atmosphere of kind of insecurity through her manga. And finally, so in the conclusion, I'd like to propose how we are able to read her works already published 20 or 30 decades ago. My argument is we still need to read Okazaki as a kind of reflection on contemporary world and society, not only for Japanese readers, but also I argue. So reading Okazaki is a very kind of great experience for everyone in our society, globalized society of contemporary world. Okay, that's my content. Okay. Now I move on to section 2, material girls in Japan. In this part, I'm talking about the very, very short history of contemporary Japanese society and how and follows Okazaki's works in that time. Okay, so this is a kind of very, very quick explanatory description of consumer society in Japan. Postwar prosperity reached at peak in the late 1980s, such kind of period called bubble economy period. Because of the growing bubble economy, Japan's economy becomes the second largest in the world around 3 decades ago. And as a consequence, there comes kind of new cultural attitudes, so-called post-war in Japan. It's not just about kind of economic change, but also new kind of sense of culture and the new types of identity brought about in Japanese society during that time. Yeah. There are many studies called bubble economy studies and bubble society, bubble period studies are found in Japan. The right one, the titled Bubble Culture, by Hara is one of them. Okay. Yeah. So in that period, Okazaki started her career as a manga artist. And in early works in the 80s and early 90s, there are many types of very enjoyable freedom of choice and discouraged by a sense of social disparity because of kind of economic prosperity, and Japanese society became so wealthy, and the people began to feel a sense of freedom and equity thanks to very, very powerful economy in the Japanese society. Yeah, but the important thing is that so there are still normative social values secure in that period. So this is the right image is from Okazaki's works published in 1992. And those girls really enjoyed consumer society and really enjoy freedom. They can buy anything. They can drink anything. They can doing anything what they like. In the meantime, they are kind of very kind of basic sense, basic cultural sense and basic social sense still comes from very kind of normative gender laws and the kind of gender divisions or something like that. Yeah, that's why. So some argue during that time, Japanese women to attain freedom of self in consumer society. But I really have a question about that sense because so comparing to Western sense of feminism, which argued kind of the achievement of equity in a kind of production between men and women. Both men and women are encouraged to work together and to taking care of children together. But in the Japanese economic prosperity and social achievement ladder, strengthen our division of labor of men and women, or kind of new types of gender division between male producer and the female consumer. As a consequence, young female kind of became a new types of cultural subject who are very kind of enthusiastic consumer to identify herself through semiotic consumption in the material society. That's why so I call those kind of female protagonists in Okazaki's works material girls. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's see some cases of material girls in consumer society through her works. This is one of her early works, Kuchibiru kara sandanju, shotgun out of the mouth. It's a very interesting title. This is a kind of story of three young women, Sakae, Natsumi, and Miwako, who are friends since high school and living in Tokyo at age 23. And 23 years old in that time is a kind of time where female began to think about marriage seriously in Japan. Yeah, that's why 23 is old enough for Japanese women in that time to get married. That's why so they often talk about how they are able to find a good boyfriend. Good boyfriend means a kind of very educated, wealthy, high income, and high tall man. Yeah. That's why so story consists in their chatting about shopping, fashion, cultural trends, and romance toward marriage. That's why so Okazaki's works are able to read as a kind of historical text to understand what happened, what kind of trend brought about during that time. Yeah, but in the meantime, no matter how those three females are enjoying their own lives in the bubble society, they still follow pretty much normative gender codes, undoubtedly. Yeah, like searching for happiness and self through the material fulfillment always comes with such kind of very strong gender norms. Yeah, as a kind of female, Japanese female. Yeah. Okay, now I see. Yeah, this is a quite good example. Those three girls are talking about who's an ideal boyfriend. They say ideal boyfriend must be tall, with high income and good educated. Yeah, actually, this kind of very stereotypical ideal model of male figure for female is still very pretty much kind of sense of normative gender roles and gender kind of characteristics, gender identities in Japanese society in the 1980s. So that's why, so while so they really enjoy what they like and they are searching their own kind of identity, freedom, and enjoy their lifestyle, they also follow very strong normative feeling of kind of gender identity in the meantime. Such gap should be led by in Okazaki's text, but in the most of protagonists, female protagonists in her works rarely understood such kind of gap and the contradiction between individual freedom and following gender norms in the Japanese consumer society. But such kind of gap sometimes causes some kind of identity crisis and panics or insecurity for such kind of female protagonist in her later works. Okay. Now, let's see the next one. Yeah, this is a very pretty much typical girls story, not for kind of bachelor women, like a Cinderella. So those girls are always looking for very kind of best, very tough, rich, very educated men, things like that. Yeah. Okay. So now I move on to the next work. Yep. Next works, the title Tokyo Girls Bravo. Tokyo Girls Bravo is a story of those Sakae, Natsumi, and Miyako in high school. So the previous work focused on her life after graduation of junior high school or university or junior college or whatever. So now this second works focus on her high school days. Her high school days was set in an early bubble period. The story starts, so Sakae moved to Tokyo from Hokkaido. Sakae was really crazy about very Tokyo's upper culture scene, and she was really longing for experience such kind of latest culture scene in Tokyo, in Hokkaido. That's why, so once she moved to Tokyo and became a friend with Natsumi and Miyako. Natsumi and Miyako is a local Tokyoite. They become a good friend and they began to enjoy very latest culture scene in Tokyo. Yeah, and there are many kind of description of both attraction and emptiness of hyper-consumer society. This in this work, Okazaki writes their kind of everyday is a very ironically. So those high school girls enjoy very latest culture scene and one of the biggest consumer society in the world. I mean Tokyo. As a teenager or young adults. In the meantime, they sometimes feel kind of emptiness or kind of sense of insecurity in their lives and in their stories. Yep. That's why, so in these works, I found such kind of those three girls' ambivalent feeling of endless ordinary life. Endless ordinary life means a kind of prosperity of Japanese society in the post-war period. It's called owari naki nichijou. And also, they feel a kind of expectation of end of the world. They expect those kind of very kind of beautiful days doesn't last long. So they always hold such kind of very ambivalent feelings. The world lasts longer and forever permanently, but they might break down someday, sometime. Actually, that's true because the bubble economy bursted in the early 90s. Those kind of ambivalent sense was very peculiar in Japanese popular culture in 80s and early 90s, according to famous Japanese sociologist Miyadai and others. They published very interesting research work about such kind of ambivalent feeling of Japanese represented by popular culture around that time, published in 1993. Yeah. Some part of this book was translated and published in English. Okay. Yeah. Let me see such kind of ambivalent feeling. In the left image, they really enjoy Harajuku. But actually, Miyako and Natsumi were a little bit tired of Sakae because Sakae was so much crazy and so much happy about wandering, strolling Harajuku because she dreamed of Tokyo's high culture in Hokkaido. But when you see the right image, they all of a sudden feel some kind of emptiness and they wish such kind of enjoyable time lasts long. But in the meantime, they are very kind of feeling kind of pathetic and they're feeling kind of sad. They're feeling something very kind of emptiness or kind of void in such kind of hyper-consumer society. They couldn't say anything verbally, but they felt something, something empty as a kind of young teenagers. Yeah, this is a kind of symptom in Okazaki's works because in the later works, Okazaki's later works, there are so many kind of representation and expression of kind of sense of feelingness and insecurity, of kind of ambivalent feeling toward changing society. Yeah. Okay. In fact, during that time, so as a sociologist, I have to say, kind of gender division of labor and normative gender laws never changed. Japanese society really changed in 80s and 90s, economically and culturally. But in terms of gender accounts, they never changed very much. So this is a kind of latest figure about female professionals in Japan and the US. So you see two different color of stars, and this is a number of female professionals outside of human services, such as engineers or kind of architecturing or more high income division. So as you see, actually in Japan, gender division of labor is still strong, and females are still tend to find a job in the human services rather than other more high income divisions. Okay, yeah. That's why, so in 90s, after the burst of the bubble economy, Japanese women all of a sudden left in a very severe situation, because so they never expected to gain a higher income because of such kind of remaining gender division of labor. But strong gender division of labor in Japanese society remains up to today. And not only about Japanese sociologists, even many kind of non-Japanese sociologists and kind of historians, anthropologists argue that same point. And actually, in terms of feminism, it's a bit traced a strange story in Japan. We often, of course, we see a kind of growing sense of feminism or some success of feminism movement in Japan, but not very successful. And the feminism in Japan followed traces, consequented in a very different way, different trajectory from Western society. Yeah. As a consequence, gendered division of labor maintained in by economic society. Some criticize Japan's economic prosperity during that time could be made by the maintenance of gender division of labor in Japan, because Japan never accepts migrants. That's why, to keep a cheaper labor force, Japanese society always remain women as a kind of cheaper labor force. That's why gender division of labor is still necessary for Japanese society to gain economic success. This is a kind of very kind of contradiction of Japanese women. While they feel a kind of sense of growing society and freedom of self, but their kind of actual status faced still kind of lesser situation, and both economically and the labor job market. But Japanese society and still needs such kind of gender division of labor between men and women instead of taking a cheaper labor force from outside of the country. Yep. But in the meantime, so Japanese female began to employ growing consumption practice as a consequence of new identity of women in the gendered society. Instead of thinking about the achievement of gender equity in production, in the kind of production field, like achieving the same income and the same job opportunity. Instead, they want to be different from men as a kind of hyper consumer, in contrast to Japanese male worker as a producer in the productive division. This is a kind of very, very unique and alternative mode of Japanese women's strategy, self-strategy to make a secure and unique identity as a women of freedom in the consumer society. Yep. And my thesis is such kind of new types of kind of material girl identity is often described in both positively and negatively in Okazaki's works. Okay. Yep. Yeah, this is a kind of mid summary of this section 2, feminine self in Japanese consumer society. First, in Western society, most of Western society, there was a general question of feminism as a deconstruction of the gender division of labor in the production system in Western society. Same income, same job opportunity, same equality means a kind of productive equality in the Western feminists. But Japan traced in a different trajectory. They separated the division of production of consumption by gender. That's why there came a new division of male and female consumers in the gendered society. Actually, gender role still remains in such circumstances, no matter how society changes. Yeah. But in the meantime, young females began to emphasize on difference rather than equity, as later discourages inequality about the basic social structure. Instead of chasing the achievement of equity in the production market, instead, they began to become something different subject from men, emphasizing their very, very unique and new types of consumer behavior. Yeah, this is a type of new types of gender division of labor between production and the consumption field. Yeah, but such kind of strategy is pretty much vulnerable to a sense of uncertainty through the burst of the not battle, it's a bubble economy as a consumer product of feminine self, because consumer product of feminine self can be achievable under the economic prosperity of Japanese society. That's why once economic prosperity burst in Japanese society, they all of a sudden lost something to refer to identify herself. Yeah, because so they are not able to seek their strong identity in the production field, production as a product, as a kind of as male worker. But there is no more strong consumer market in Japanese society. And where is the women as a consequence? That becomes a very serious and the biggest question since the late 90s in Japan. Okay, and now we move to section 3. Okay. So as a consequence, so by the burst of a bubble economy, material girls began to suffer from kind of ontological insecurity. So, and after bubble society, after the burst of bubble economy, Japan experienced a pretty much long-term economic recession since mid-1990s. Even until today, it's not recovered at all. And as well, we also experienced a pretty much rapid process of globalization in domestic society with neoliberal social reform in the since late 90s. Yeah, everything changed suddenly. Not only just about domestic change, we also experienced some kind of global shift with kind of neoliberalization of society, because so in early 2000s, Japanese government decided neoliberal policy reform to get rid of a long-term economic recession, but it couldn't make it very much. Yeah. As a consequence, not only female figures, but also males and everyone, especially younger generation, are overshadowed by ontological insecurity. This is a kind of very different types of ontological insecurity. Yeah. Comparing to Western society on the basis of individualization of society. Yeah, under such circumstances, so we move on to the question how material girls, Japanese material girls established in the hyper-consumer society reconstituted or failed to reconstitute herself since late 90s. Okay. And now, finally, I introduce Pink. This is a pretty famous work by Kyoko Okazaki and translated into many languages. I think some of them have read Pink in Italian or English or French. This is a story of Yumiko, heroine. She's a hero, and the heroine is an office worker living in Tokyo, but she has a secret. She also works as a call girl by night. But why she has to work as a call girl by night? Because she don't care how hard she has to work. if she can make the money necessary to buy something beautiful. This is a kind of her kind of script. She tells herself at the beginning of the story. She wants to buy. She wants to achieve any lifestyle she wants. To doing so, she doesn't care no matter what work she does, no matter how long she works. She's her lifestyle, her life course is totally constituted by consumer society. Making money is her priority to achieve her life because she wants to be free. She wants to enjoy her own unique individual lifestyle. For that reason, she has a kind of dual work. She works in the office in the daytime, and she works as a call girl by night. Yeah. And this is one of her kind of very unique lifestyle. For example, so in the early period of a story, so she and her crocodile comes in the story. Actually, she's living in the central Tokyo, but she has a large crocodile, and she makes money for a large amount of kind of food for her pretty crocodile. It's a very strange. It's almost impossible to have such huge, large crocodile in Tokyo. But to make it, she makes money, and she builds kind of secret space in her flat, small flat. I understand this crocodile is a very, very symbol of some kind of ambivalence of her life, because she wants to do anything in Tokyo. She wants to be anyone in Tokyo. In the meantime, she always feels a sense of kind of unfamiliarity in her life in Tokyo, because crocodile living in central Tokyo is a very nonsense. It's a very kind of strange kind of situation, strange environment. So for crocodile, Tokyo is pretty much bad, and very kind of crocodile should be lived in more wider outside space in a tropical state or something. But crocodile is a kind of symbolic image of herself, who is living in Tokyo, feeling very, very uncomfortable, but she has no choice. Yeah. So this next image is you see her face, how she looks like on the top left. She's talking about happiness, but it doesn't look like talking about happiness. Yeah, she rather is a very kind of stable or sensing something else. Even though she talks about happiness, she doesn't believe it, or she doesn't feel happiness itself. That's very kind of strange expression. And as Okazaki draws her very kind of ambivalent feelings. She always talks about happiness. She always chasing her happiness, but she never satisfies itself. Yeah, she always feeling some kind of emptiness in her life. Yeah. And one day, her crocodile was stolen by someone, actually stolen by her mom-in-law, and they didn't have a good relationship. And she got panicked all of a sudden. So after losing her pretty crocodile, so she couldn't find anything stable. Even though spending ordinary life, she all of a sudden feel panic. And all of a sudden she's sitting down on the street, or she couldn't feel anything, and just panicked. And so many spaces and boys on both pages. Yeah. Actually, so her stolen crocodile comes back to her, but it was very tragedy because her mom-in-law killed her crocodile and made a crocodile leather suitcase of her pretty crocodile and sent it back to her daughter-in-law. But she finally fed up living in Tokyo, and she tried to escape. She tried to away from Tokyo, which was almost impossible for her pretty crocodile, because the crocodile was in Tokyo and finally stolen and killed. But she tried to living away from Tokyo with her boyfriend. And this is the last page of Pink. And she was really looking forward to kind of a new environment at the airport and waiting for her boyfriend. But she didn't know yet her boyfriend was already rolled over by a car and killed. Yeah, this is the end of the story. Actually, so no one knows if she ran away from Japan or not. This is a kind of, but Okazaki says in the end mark of this work, she says this is a story of an ordinary girl and her love story in a capitalist society. Okazaki says this is a very ordinary story, not very unique story and special story or special girl's story. This is a kind of ordinary women's story in a capitalist society around that time. Every girl feels suffocated, that it's very difficult to live away from Tokyo's lifestyle. So once she wants to be free from such kind of very kind of tight emptiness, so she has no way but spending money and making money and purchasing commodities. Yeah, but this ordinary story is a kind of totally failure of the fulfillment of the quality of life by quantity. Actually, so I argued before, a Japanese girl during that time wanted to be a perfect consumer, to be a different, to obtain a different unique identity in consumer society, rather than competing, rather than fighting against male-dominated society. They chose to be a perfect consumer, staying away from male-dominated society. But such kind of consumer behavior never gives them happiness. Rather, such kind of practice always give them some kind of very ambivalent feeling of kind of growing void, growing emptiness in their lives in Tokyo or other big cities in Japan. Yeah, that's why. So I repeat it again. There was kind of dominant social norms parodied about, but never questioned. This is a kind of very parody of how Japanese women in consumer society or Japanese material girls survive in Japanese consumer society. It's a parody, but gender norms never be questioned or never be challenged. They have no way but just kind of trying accommodating themselves as a perfect consumer in a very contradicted capitalist society, rather than fighting, questioning, criticizing against the social structure of itself. Yeah, this is my reading of Pink. And I also introduced another very important work. It's not about gender, but this is more about kind of young Japanese in the 90s as a whole. It's a reverse edge translated into French now. This reverse edge is my most favorite works of Okazaki's publications. Yeah, the entire mood of this kind of high school boys and girls story is so much kind of stuck and suffocated. This is a story of unforeseen life of high school girl Kana and her classmate Ichiro. But Ichiro is the male prostitute but has a girlfriend constantly stalking him. And her junior friend Kozue suffering from vomiting induced by excessive eating. Everyone has some mental problem. Everyone has a communicating with classmates and others. They are looking for friends, but they never believe each other. That's a kind of very kind of ambivalent, kind of unstable feeling is the entire atmosphere of the stories. Yeah, and surrounded and also surrounded by sex violence, urine, drugs, and helplessness. This is a story of high school students, but they are always taking drugs and having sex with others, and they often kind of see many kind of violent scenes, situations, and they feel hopelessness and helplessness. But the ambivalent sense of this communication or connection, this connection with friends and society, even a brief tie with sharing a secret, secret one means dead body, deserted on the bank of river's edge. It's those protagonists are able to connect each other through the dead body. They cannot believe, they cannot trust each other very much, but they are connected temporarily. They are connected shortly only by sharing the secret of the dead body deserted on the river's edge. They need death. They need outside of society. They try to look for something outside of society, like a dead body, to connect or reconnect each other, but it didn't last long. Yeah. Such kind of similar experimental plots, frequently found in her short stories during the same period to the future Helter Skelter. Actually, River's Edge is now kind of the atmosphere, or kind of Okazaki's kind of challenge expressed, represented in the River's Edge is now kind of developed to the kind of key story, key plots of Helter Skelter, and many other short stories trace the same topic and same theme and published during that time. Okay. Yeah. And finally, it's Helter Skelter, Okazaki's most famous publication and Okazaki's last publication before she got the accident. Yeah, this is a kind of story of the success and the decline of Ridicule, a successful model and actress in Tokyo. So Ridicule represent as a very successful celebrity, but in the meantime, she was a product of frequent illegal continual plastic surgery in a consumer society. That's why, so I call her Semiotic Girl. So everything is fake, but she was constituted or being constituted, maintained, created by such kind of signs. Yeah, kind of that's why, so I call her semiotic figure, yeah, of consumer society. She doesn't have anything real. She really wants real. She really wants to be a real celebrity, but couldn't do it. That's a kind of key story of Helter Skelter. Yeah, this is a kind of beginning of the story, and Lirico is a high celebrity, and so everyone talks about herself. Everyone talks about her images and her beauty. Such kind of semiotic image is a kind of all part of herself, but nothing, no information and no voices comes to reality of herself. Yep. But one day she finds something wrong with her body, her kind of body, and she had to go back to the kind of repeatful plastic surgery and physical treatment at the illegal hospital. Yeah, but she was always so desperate to become to become a true celebrity, and she spent all her efforts to become real, but she couldn't make it. She's just declining as a consequence. But there are more sadness comes around Ridicule. One day, when she is struggling with a growing fear of losing herself in the decline of her popularity against another artificial Ridicule and her successor, Kozue. So one day she met her successor, young new model, Kozue, who possesses natural beauty. Yeah, compared to Ridicule's artificial beauty, so Kozue has a natural beauty, yeah, which is not available for Ridicule. Ridicule spent so much time, and Ridicule devoted whole of her life to become a beautiful celebrity through plastic surgery and artificial bodies. But Kozue is a natural beauty when she was born. Yeah, that's a quite tragic contrast. Once Ridicule saw Kozue, so Ridicule felt so much fear of herself, and her kind of position will be taken over by Kozue one day. That becomes her obsession, and disregarded, and even her boss, Ridicule's boss, disregarded her, and her boss called Ridicule a product of plastic surgeries, and denying Ridicule's desperate effort to success. Actually, Ridicule is a very strong woman. She spent the whole of her efforts and her life to become a beauty celebrity, but her boss denied it. Her boss says, you are just my product. I just invested much amount of money for her plastic surgery. That's why you are just product. She is denied as a kind of human being. She's denied. She is denied her integrity. She just says you are just a product in the consumer market. So that simply get lyrical down more and more. And now, as a consequence, her life becomes so kind of declining. That's why so it's going like a helter-skelter. Yeah, she's getting panicked. She's kind of becoming more and more aggressive, and she's attacking people around her. Yeah, and in the story, this is a kind of moment when Liliko was told her by her boss, "You are just a product." She couldn't believe that because that denies how much she made effort to become a beautiful woman by herself. She denied everything from the beginning. She denied herself, yeah, because she wanted to be a kind of subject, celebrity, successful celebrity. But she was told, you are just a product in a consumer society. That's a kind of shocking identity crisis for her, as well as Kozue's appearance. Yeah, and there's a third protagonist. It's a young male public prosecutor chasing for illegal operation that Liliko takes frequently. Liriko's denotation to related illegal operations becomes a subject of investigation, but Asada's a kind of evaluation of Liriko's is very strange and so much different from Liliko herself. Asada simply approaches Liriko's artificial beauty. He says Liriko's artificial beauty is beautiful because it's artificial, and her bottomless desire to become an object of consumption in public. Asada's attitude is very postmodern. So Asada never believes something real. Instead, so no matter how fake they are, no matter how artificial they are, Asada regards Liriko as a very beauty figure because of her much effort to become a real. Yeah, she is unable to real, but Asada simply applauds her efforts, her kind of desire, or rather strong desire, bottomless desire to become a real celebrity, real beautiful figure. Yeah, that's why his respect of Liriko's semiotic self, montage of anything beautiful sustained by her bottomless desire to do so. This is a very kind of typical posture of intellectuals, of postmodern intellectuals during that time. Postmodern intellectual during that time simply applauds semiotic society. We don't need a real. We just need semiotic subject is enough. We can change. We can be anything we like. That's a kind of very typical intellectual voice of kind of consumer society during that time. Postmodern theory in kind of late 90s was like that. But such kind of intellectual discourse never gives Liriko more kind of security, sense of security. Rather, just get her panicked and confused and fragmented in her daily life. This is a gap of kind of an intellectual story of postmodern consumer society and actual feeling of female self. Yeah. Okazaki draws kind of sharp contrast between such kind of male intellectual voice of postmodern and actual sense of feeling of femininity in such postmodern world without a sense of security. Yeah. Okay. But as a consequence, as a result, Liriko's semiotic collage never makes her obtain a stable self in consumer society. She couldn't help but living away from Japanese celebrity. She lost everything. She couldn't be a real celebrity. She was taken over. She was replaced with someone else, or new semiotic celebrity. To the end, she disappeared from Japan. This is the last scene of her disappearance. But Kozue found her a few years later in Mexico as a member of Freak Show. So Kozue found Ridicule in Mexico. Ridicule was a member of Freak Show. She became a new freak. She got a new identity. She got a new secure identity, but she's no more able to kind of beautiful celebrity. She got more secure, stable identity as a freak. She gave up being kind of beauty female posture in the consumer society. But in the meantime, she got more secure identity as a freak. That's a kind of irony. Yeah. Feminine self in consumer societies unable to secure identity as a semiotic subject, as a semiotic material girl. Otherwise, she has to be freak outside of consumer society. But it means she gives up her femininity. That's a very contradiction and irony. Yeah. As a consequence, so I argued in my article published 2 years ago, Okazaki's works and her protagonists, like a ridicule, are witness of the consequences of the construction of the feminine self in Japanese consumer society. A kind of construction of feminine self in consumer society gives them a kind of very, very temporal identity, but always fragmented, always changing, into very fluid. That's why women in consumer society always has to struggle with sense of uncertainty and ontological insecurity in contrast to male subjects who are always situated in a stable position in the Japanese male-dominant society. Yep. And that's my key argument in my article. Okay. And let me conclude this section by this citation by Japanese sociologist called Flat Culture to describe Japanese consumer society and its consequence. So Endo, he says, social reality is constituted on the premise that various cultures are truly collapsing into each other. There is no strong value hierarchy. It is as if all dimensions placed in parallel can be smoothly browsed. Furthermore, this parallel structure in society facilitates differentiation. But the most important thing is this his argument. Situating oneself with an established history that stretches prior to one's birth is now difficult. This is both a condition and the result of the situation. So Andrew says, so our flat culture is very, very, all values are parallel, all values are differentiated. Technically, we can choose any culture to identify ourselves. But as a consequence of such parallel structure, it is getting harder and harder for us to find more kind of hierarchy and unequal social structure, discrimination and inequality or something like that is always replaced with just a difference. Inequity is always translated into difference. As a consequence, in such flat culture, we are unable to find ourselves in a more kind of difficult, unequal hierarchy situation. The same point can be depictable to refer to gender division of labor and gendered society in Japan. That's why so I cited this Endo's statement to remark flat culture of contemporary Japanese society. That's why so female subject is able to identify herself through consumption or through semiotic consumption. But it's getting harder and harder for her to find how those female subject, female identities are placed in a more unequal structure of Japan's gendered society. Yep. It was my argument in my early work here. Okay, but to conclude my lecture today, I'd like to add new points which I didn't discuss in my early work. I try to translate my argument. I try to reintroduce my argument into kind of the contemporary situation. Before that, let me quickly wrap up my key argument of Okazaki's works. So first, representation of frequent self-destruction of the body, like sex, drugs, and the violence of Okazaki's materialized girls are very key figure in her works. There are two ways to understand or to kind of to criticize such kind of expression in her works. First is this is a kind of critical performance toward the construction of the anti-normative self to be observed. Sex, violence, drugs are kind of very could be understood as a kind of her kind of challenge to deconstruct normative female body, more kind of domestic female body in the Japanese society. But in the meantime, we have to be aware of the point that there was kind of foreclosure by the logic of semiotic self in the dual division of gender in the Japanese social structure. No matter how much those female figures challenges something different from more domestic girls images, they are already placed in the consumer side. They are already divided into production and the consumption and the price data consumption. So in the divided situation, they try to be more kind of freer and individual subject, but they are already divided. They are already kind of discriminated in the Japanese society. In Japanese society, male are always producer and the females are always consumer. No matter how much they consume semiotic values, no matter how much they do semiotic consumption and structure a new identity, new feminine self, they are already thrown into kind of product of consumer market and the consumer society, as Liliko was told by her boss. And in the current situation, we have to be more and more critical approach to that circumstances. So in the last decade in Japan, there are new terms comes up to describe female ability and female power. It's called joshiryoku. But I really question about the kind of applause, kind of evaluation of joshiryoku, like many post-feminist critic in Japan, because joshiryoku is a kind of very strange neoliberal idea of female power and female individuality. Such kind of discourse encourages women to become more strong, tough women to survive in such difficult society by accumulating girls' abilities and girls' powers. They never say, we have more equality, we have more difference, we have more diversity. Instead, they say, the girls must be more and more girls by accumulating such kind of joshiryoku. But as I have repeated again and again, so in Japanese society, there is still strong gender division and gender discrimination and structurally. That's why no matter how much those women get the joshiryoku and become a powerful women, their social situation, social circumstances never be able to change. Rather, it can be a kind of very perfect alibi to get women placed in the female position and the lesser social situation. And the more worse, neoliberal discourse always encourages everything a matter of one's responsibility. That's why even if those girls failed to get the joshiryoku and feeling in anxiety or insecurity or kind of ontological insecurity in Japanese society, no one can help it. No social structure supports it in such neoliberalist society. Society just says that's a matter of yourself. That's your responsibility. Why you failed to accumulate your own joshiryoku? That's the society says in neoliberalist society. That's why the situation actually became worse today, even comparing to early 2000s. This is my viewpoint. Yeah. So that's why semiotic feminine self is a possible form. Some critics say, semiotic feminine self represented by ridicule is a kind of possible force of performativity, like Judith Butler, like performing female figure, and again, there might be something new possibility, critical possibility comes up to deconstruct Japanese gender division of labor or gendered society. But under the current situation, such kind of female performativity in consumer society would be more kind of a difficult situation under the neoliberalization of Japanese society today. And neoliberalization is about a global trend. It's not only Japanese issue. Every country of the world now becomes so neoliberalized, very, very individualist society. And people seldom talks about himself or herself collectivity. Every identity is not just matter of individual issue. Identity issue and always subject issue is always social issue. That's why so we are getting harder and harder to identify ourselves with a social construct, social structure and the collective senses. That's why so I still believe reading Okazaki works is a very, very worthful in the current situation, not only in Japan, but also in the international context. Yeah. And finally, I'd like to remark on some kind of what we can think about rereading Okazaki's material girls in the global context, because Okazaki works gained a very, very global popularity now, so translated into many languages. Under the current global situation, I'd like to propose 3 questions to conclude my lecture. First, through reading Okazaki, we will find some kind of common sense of feeling anxiety and ontological insecurity in our world represented by Okazaki's protagonist. This is quite similar to how Murakami Haruki becomes so popular globally beyond Japanese society. Everyone now shares a sense of feeling anxiety and ontological insecurity, regardless of culture and society. By reading Okazaki and having a sympathy with her protagonist, we might share such kind of feelings and to struggle with that issue altogether beyond culture and society. And the second point is comes from the atmosphere fueled by COVID-19 through the advent of post-truth period. How we are able to such kind of very depressive situation, global situation under the spread, global spread of COVID-19 and growing sense of feeling anxiety and a growing sense of post-truthness. So to deal with such kind of sense, so we can read Okazaki and we can think about how we are able to survive such kind of very difficult situation. And the third point is more kind of from Japanese studies perspective, and I'd like to suggest there is a kind of transnational gaze at Asian femininity, how Asian femininity and Asian girls representation are translated and understood in the kind of Western context or non-Japanese context, like a kind of, there are many discourse in Japanese society about the representation of Japanese feminine self and new girl images, like a techno-orientalist approach or feminist bodies approach in the global context. The third point is more kind of related to Japanese studies outside of Japan and how Japanese female figures are translated and recognized in such kind of academic scholarly field outside of Japan. Yep. Yep, that's all for today. Yeah, thank you for being here. And I really appreciate to your kind of question and comments. Yep.
Thank you, Professor Hamano, for your interesting lecture, very insightful. And if anyone wants to ask a question, just write it on the chat or raise your hands with the Zoom function. Gaia, if you want to.
No, if Luca wants to go first, please do.
No,
Okay.
go on, no problem.
Oh, okay. Wait, I will turn on my video. Maybe it would be better. First of all, I really want to thank Professor Hamano for this extremely interesting lecture. And I was listening very excitingly to all of your point of views and perspective. And I really loved your critical view of Kyoko works. I want to do first a comment and then maybe a question. So yeah, as you said, I think that in the 90s and the early 2000s, young people still felt as if they could avoid thinking actively about certain problems, as if they were inside a current and they couldn't actually swim against this current. And so all they could do was suffer and maybe accept passively their destiny. I think that maybe this kind of sentiment is still present now, even if with different declinations, as you said before, even with this, the COVID-19 situation, the pandemic, this sense of post-truth and new normality, I think it has actually influenced significantly the way young people relate to society. But I think that there is also a very strong element of urgency, of time that is about to run out. And so there is a sense of responsibility that maybe young people are starting to feel, and that I think that it was not present in a few generations ago, like in the early 2000s. I think that society is still seen as decadent somehow, and there is an inevitability to this sense of decadence. But people maybe are more aware, and I think also that the fact that discourses about gender and inequalities are much more present and loud and explicit today helps a lot going through, maybe not changing what is happening, but going towards a direction of change and a view of society as a community, even if it's quite paradoxical to the neoliberalism movement that it's still quite strong today. And I think that the sense of hopelessness that you talked about before has become some kind of nostalgia, maybe for a past in which young people feel they could have lived with less pressure. Whilst today, this pressure of doing something because they don't have time anymore is very strong. And I think it brings anxiety, but can also lead to action and trying actively to change the situation. And so my question related to this comment is, how would you think that Okazaki Kyoko would insert this new sentiment inside her stories, and how would she narrate about young people if she were to write a story today?
Okay, yeah, that's quite interesting question. Thank you. Yeah, actually, so I always try to making a chance to read Okazaki with my students. Most of my students born in during that time, late 90s and early 2000s. And many students, Japanese students, always tells me, so they are grown up in a very depressing circumstances. Both teachers and their parents always tells them in the youngsters, they are living in a very difficult situation and a hard situation and having a nostalgia against the bubble period. That's why, so they always try to feel something living in a difficult situation. But one of kind of suggestions I can propose through reading Okazaki together to my students will be, so even their kind of senior older generations had the same feeling, and not only specific to kind of the current younger generations. Ontological insecurity part of our everyday life. We shouldn't think it about negatively. Insecurity is also really a chance of changing something new, but this logic is very dangerous to some extent because this is typical neoliberal logic. That's why, so additionally, I would say we have to talk, we have to connect, we have to try talking to something new people like this opportunity. Yeah, instead of making a more secure space, instead of making a very tough community or a kind of bubble enclaves. So we will have more kind of maximize this kind of uncertainty by connecting, by finding something new beyond the culture and the society. And then we can share such kind of same feeling beyond the culture and the society. Yeah, that's a kind of very necessary for the current situation, because in the 90s, Okazaki's protagonist was unable to connect beyond the Japanese society. But so we have internet and we have such kind of online system, and we have language barriers, cultural barriers though, but the people living in the 2020s, we are able to connect more and more. We have more opportunities to get connected thanks to such kind of technology. That's why so I always encourage my students to make use of such kind of privileged social situation, rather than take your lifestyle or something. That's kind of my prescription in my university education.
Yes, thank you very much. That is actually the solution that I'm trying to apply, even when relating to the students I work with, is actually the keyword is always communication and building a sense of community that goes beyond something that is more like a cluster, but some things that goes even beyond something that we relate strictly to ourselves. So thank you very much for everything and the comment as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Luca, please, if you want to.
Thank you very much for your paper. I didn't know anything about Kyoko Okazaki, and I read everything I can as soon as possible. I just wanted to ask a little curiosity that will become maybe a suggestion. Did someone ever make a comparison between Pink and Breakfast at Tiffany's with Audrey Hepburn? Because the plot is almost the same. They do the same work. They do the same work, even if in the movie is not crystal clear. It's crystal clear in the novel. The movie elicit. They have their breakdown when they lose. It corresponds to the loss of their personal pet that they find back at the end. And there is this sense of emptiness, trying to find out an independence doing this kind of work in this kind of world and this kind of society, and finding out the differences could be very interesting.
Yeah, that's very interesting comparison between Breakfast at Tiffany and Pink. I never know about such kind of comparison, but actually plot is quite alike. But in the meantime, so if you read both works, so you will find more some kind of very kind of typical kind of culture, social atmosphere of Japanese society during that time in Pink, which is very different from the situation. So where kind of Western femininity was praised, even though so Breakfast at Tiffany was written a few decades ago. So especially so. I didn't say very much about that point today because I mostly focused on gender issues. But in Okazaki's works, she always likes about some kind of family problem. There are never a kind of normal standard family appeared in her works. Everyone always has a family problem. That's why so even though so in a very intimate relationship, intimate partnership, those Japanese female protagonists always have some kind of problem. Yeah, such kind of point would be very kind of unique aspect in the Japanese works because family is one of the most key intimate relationship in Japanese society, and comparing to very kind of Anglo society. Yeah, actually, family was thought to be the first priority in Japanese society for long. But in Okazaki's works, everyone has a problem with families, their families. So in Pink's case, the protagonist, she's always traveling with her mom-in-law. Actually, her mom, a real mom, killed herself, suicided. Yeah, that's why. So such kind of another angle would be very interesting to think about more comparative approach. Comparative approach is very good because by comparison, we can find something common. And in the meantime, by comparison, through comparison, we can find something different and how such kind of different description and representation comes up from different contexts and perspectives. Yeah, thank you very much. Your comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much to you.
Dr. Asuka Ozumi, if you want to make a question, please do it.
Hi, everyone. First off, let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm Asuka Ozumi. I am the editor-in-chief of Delineates Showcase, the publisher who published Pink and Helter Skelter here in Italy.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to give a very brief explanation why I chose Pink and why I chose Helter Skelter. And this is related to a very strong debate here in Italy after more than 20 years about sex work and about positivity. And even in contemporary Italy, the feminists are still divided between seeing sex work as a form of exploitation and male oppression, and people who, women who see today free sex work as a kind of empowerment for women. And so the debate in Italy is very, very strong. And this is why I chose the Pink, because there's, what I really liked is that there is not any kind of judgment about what feminists do for living. And about Helter Skelter, we now we see in advertising and websites of fashion, we see different kind of bodies. But it's something that it started to happen in the last years, and I think today there's still a very, very strong social pressure to perform perfect bodies, but things are changing. And so I thought that Helter Skelter is a very significant work in this perspective. And this is why the first two works chosen by Kyoko Okazaki were these first titles. But I have one question for you, because during Kyoko Okazaki was, she had exhibition in art galleries. She was hanging out with Murakami Takashi. She had she wrote on female magazines, and she was a sort of example of lifestyle for her readers. And what I wanted to ask you is maybe in a certain way for some years Moyoko Anno Moyoko, maybe we can consider, we can think about Moyoko Anno as a her of Kyoko Okazaki, but Moyoko Anno Moyoko is now in maybe in her 50s or late 40s. So do you think there is any Japanese female artist today that we can consider significant for the society and for the pop culture as a whole, as Kyoko Okazaki in her core period?
So so the first, so I reply to your comments. So I really finally understood why Pink and Helter Skelter are initially translated in Italian. I think so. Italian society is also its unique, its social cultural circumstances about gender and feminism comparing to other Western European society. Of course, so we shouldn't generalize Western society as a whole. So every country, every society has a very different context regarding gender and feminism and femininity. But so that's why, so I was curious about why Italian publisher, so your publisher chose Pink and Helter Skelter, and I finally understood the reason why. And thank you very much for sharing that information. And the second point is more kind of, yeah, this is my kind of last argument, because how kind of Japanese femininity should be recognized in the non-Japanese context because of such kind of joshiryoku discourse. Joshiryoku discourse sounds very positive, kind of positive consequence of feminism, but most feminism disagree with that idea. This is a typical neoliberalist discourse about because Japanese societies never dealt with actual inequality between men and women regarding material life. So they leave that question while kind of applauding gender power, the female power. The current LDP government is a typical case. Yeah, that's why. So especially so, I'm not sure how much kind of foreign curators and foreign exhibition producers and interpreted Okazaki's works in their own cultural context. But so I also agree Okazaki's works has a strong power. It's a very kind of variable text to think about what is femininity, what is women's power, what is women's possibility in contemporary world, in the capitalist world, because we are all living in a capitalist world. That's why to deal with ourselves, to save ourselves in the capitalist world, we can learn a lot from Okazaki's works. In the meantime, so I'm really aware of the current joshiryoku, girls' power discourse from more kind of critical perspective, because no one actually struggle with actual social insecurity, gender division of labor and gender inequality, and while applauding gender power. So for example, in my university runs a kind of makeup class for female students for job interview, only for female. They never teach how to tie a necktie, how to wear a suit for male students. They only learn a kind of how to make up for job interview for female students. This is a kind of typical discourse of joshiryoku. Women must be women, men must be women. Such a strong division is still kind of problematic in Japanese society, but I believe it's not a kind of division, it's not a difference. That's inequality. This is a kind of mixture of difference and inequality. That's why I'm always think how I'm able to kind of discuss such kind of very strange, twisted conjuncture of Japanese male and female from difference and inequality in my argument. Yeah, that's why. So yeah, I focused on Okazaki and added such kind of new perspective of critique of joshiryoku in the context of reading Okazaki this time. This is my experimental argument, but anyway, I tried. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I am also very critical about joshiryoku because in female magazine, all the pages about the joshiryoku up, how to increase it's all about makeup, all about being good in doing houseworks, and all about dress certain feminine standardized way. Thank you very much, Professor Hamano.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Asuka Ozumi. And there is a question in the chat. I read it for you. Or if you want to read it yourself.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Let me read. Yeah. Thank you for this lecture. And I want to ask about crocodile's symbol. Crocodile in my room. My first thought would be, I must feed him and he's going to eat me. And that's the same feeling that I had when I worked in course, and universities, like, there's no way I had to in computer system, and if I wanted to survive and go with my as a sociologist, do you think that now that we all live with? Yeah, that's very interesting question. Yeah, everyone lives with his or her crocodile. I agree with that idea, but we can also maintain good relationship with crocodile. Yeah, we don't need to be afraid of a crocodile. Crocodile technically can be a good partner. Yeah, yeah, but living with a crocodile is always feeling a sense of kind of insecurity. Your crocodile might bite you, attack you, but if everyone has a crocodile, so we want to be very kind of depressed. We want to get panicked like Yumiko, because so we can say, oh, I have a crocodile, I have my crocodile, and you have a crocodile too. What's going on? How do you take care of your crocodile? Like that. Kind of my prescription or kind of my answer is, we can say we are all having crocodile, and we can talk about each crocodile. Yeah, that's the kind of communication what I replied. Yeah, everyone has. If everyone has a crocodile, just say I have a crocodile and you have it too. Yeah, that's kind of beginning of communication and sharing a kind of feeling of kind of sense of uncertainty and insecurity. Yeah, yeah. Does do I make sense? Yeah. Okay.
But if anyone want to do another question, please do it. Otherwise, I want to do a question, if possible. Is possible?
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to ask to you, Professor Hamano, if you watched the movie about Helter Skelter, the transposition of Ninagawa Mika, one of the female Japanese female director, most important female director in Japan now, that deals with gender issues and social issues. And what do you think about it if you watch it? Because I think that Ninagawa obviously cannot transpose the nervous line of Okazaki, the force of the line of Okazaki, but use the color to make the work visually stunning. So what do you think about it, the movie, if you watch it?
Yeah, to be honest, so I didn't watch that movie Ninagawa's watch, but her Helter Skelter didn't get high popularity in Japan, unfortunately. Yeah, so when I asked my friends about the impression of that movie, they didn't enjoy a lot. Yeah, maybe Ninagawa skipped many very important plots of Helter Skelter to make a more simple kind of understandable story. Yeah, actually, so after reading Helter Skelter this morning again, I found the plot is so complicated and also incomplete. It's not about the story and Liriko's story, but it's also Liriko, Kozue, and Asada's story. And Okazaki actually failed to describe more about Kozue and Asada in relation to Liriko. That's why, so yeah, I found that point this morning, and maybe so we have to rethinking about more kind of complicated triangle relationship of Liriko, Kozue, and Asada. They are all part of Liriko. Each protagonist represent a very different part of Ridicule and something like that. And I'm not sure how much Ninagawa's movie succeeded in kind of representing such kind of a complicated kind of representation of the protagonist. Yeah, but I shouldn't say anymore because I didn't watch it.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I think that there are no more questions, so we have reached the 1 hour and 30, so I think we can finish here if for you is okay.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, again, thank you so much for giving such a very precious opportunity. So under the current COVID-19 situation, it was one of the best moment in the last 2 years. And I also wish we can keep in touch anymore, and one day we can catch up in person again in Italy or Japan or somewhere in the world. And lastly, but not least, Lorenzo, thank you so very much for your very enduring organization. Yeah, I was really happy when you sent me an invitation to this special lecture. And I hope so you and your colleagues in Gesshin will have more and more can develop a very great opportunity for the sake of Japanese studies and Asian studies in the Italian academic society. Yeah, thank you so much, and see you again.
Thank you for it's an honor for us to have us here, to have you here with this lecture, because I think that there are some themes in Okazaki's work that are very important now for the future of society, not only for the present but for the future, because reading Okazaki can possibly give us some direction to reflect about our future and our present also. Thank you again, thank you again very much for the lecture and everything. See you again, maybe next year.
See you again. Next year, yeah. Definitely, I have a chance to visit Europe next year. Yeah.
Thank you again. Okay. Thank you again. Goodbye.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye,
Goodbye.
everyone.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone.